Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, September 11, 2025. FBI releases images of a person of interest in the shooting death of conservative political activist Charlie Kirk and asks the public for help in identifying him. FBI also talks about the evidence recovered so far, including the suspected firearm used. And President Donald Trump announces he will award Charlie Kirk a posthumous Presidential Medal of Freedom. While House and Senate Democratic leaders are asked about President Trump blaming the shooting on the radical left. Solemn ceremonies on this 24th anniversary of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks at Ground Zero in New York City, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The nominee for Joint Chiefs of Staff Vice Chair, General Christopher Mahoney, asked at his Senate confirmation hearing about handling a potential order from President Trump to deploy more U.S. troops to more U.S. cities to fight crime. Senate Republicans unilaterally changed the Senate rules to make it easier to confirm President Trump's nominees. A bipartisan group of senators introduced a bill to designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism over its kidnapping of thousands of Ukrainian children. And Herschel Walker, former professional football star and Republican nominee for U.S. Senator, testifies at his Senate confirmation hearing as nominee for U.S. Ambassador to the Bahamas. ABC News writes the FBI has released images of a person of interest sought in connection with the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk, the founder of the conservative youth activist organization Turning Point USA, during an event at Utah Valley University on Wednesday. We're asking for the public's help identifying this person of interest in connection with the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk at UVU, the FBI's Salt Lake City office said on X on Thursday while sharing two images of the individual who's wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses and was captured in a stairwell in one of them. The FBI said it is offering a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to the identification and arrest of the person responsible for Kirk's murder. That was from ABC News. Here's part of the Thursday morning news conference, beginning with Bo Mason, Utah Public Safety Commissioner.
We were able to track the movements of the shooter. Starting at 11:52 a.m., the subject arrived on campus, shortly away from campus. We have tracked his movements onto the campus, through the stairwells, up to the roof, across the roof to a shooting location. After the shooting, we were able to track his movements as he moved to the other side of the building, jumped off of the building, and fled off of the campus and into a neighborhood. Our investigators have worked through those neighborhoods, contacting anybody they can with doorbell cameras, witnesses, and have thoroughly worked through those communities, trying to identify any leads. We do have good video footage of this individual. We are not going to release that at this time. We are working through some technologies and some ways to identify this individual. If we are unsuccessful, we will reach out to you as the media and we will push that publicly to help us identify them. But we are confident in our abilities right now, and we would like to move forward in a manner that keeps everyone safe and moves this process appropriately. Last night I communicated with Erica. The family's devastated. As a Commissioner of Public Safety, as a father, as a husband, I can only imagine what that family's going through. The heinous event that happened yesterday is not Utah. This is not what we're known for. Over the past several weeks, we've seen this state come together to help families in mourning, come together as a community to show what Utah is known for a state of character, of service, of camaraderie, of a neighboring feel. We will not stand for what happened yesterday. We are exhausting every lead. We have every officer invested in this, every investigator, every local agency. The outpouring of support from the law enforcement community has been astounding. We are investing everything we have into this, and we will catch this individual.
Bo Mason, Utah Public Safety Commissioner, at a Thursday morning news conference in Utah. Also there, Robert Bowles, FBI Special Agent in charge of the Salt Lake City office, who gave an update on the investigation.
Following yesterday's tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk, FBI agents have been working around the clock in coordination with our law enforcement partners. We are and will continue to work nonstop until we find the person that has committed this heinous crime and find out why they did it. This morning I can tell you that we have recovered what we believe is the weapon that was used in yesterday's shooting. It is a high-powered bolt-action rifle. That rifle was recovered in a wooded area where the shooter had fled. So the FBI laboratory will be analyzing this weapon. Investigators have also collected footwear impression, a palm print, and forearm imprints for analysis. Now, I understand there are a lot of questions about motive. I assure you that all leads, tips are being fully investigated. As of this morning, we have received more than 130 tips. We thank the community for that. The FBI has brought every resource to bear, and we will continue to do so throughout the course of this investigation. The FBI's mission is to protect the American people. It's to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Any attack on the First Amendment is an attack on the very foundation of our democracy. That is why we will relentlessly pursue this case and the shooter until we find him. We also continue to grieve with the family and the community. It's our community.
Robert Bowles, FBI Special Agent in Charge, Salt Lake City office, at a Thursday morning news conference in Utah. He asked anyone with information to call 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to fbi.gov/Utah Valley shooting. The FBI had scheduled a mid-afternoon press conference but postponed it. The Utah Department of Public Safety emailing news outlets, due to rapid developments in our investigation, we will suspend this. President Donald Trump said today he's going to award the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously to conservative activist Charlie Kirk. That's the highest civilian award of the United States, along with the Congressional Gold Medal. President Trump announced it at the start of his remarks at the Pentagon ceremony for the 9/11 attack anniversary.
Before we begin, let me express the horror and grief so many Americans at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk have felt. Charlie was a giant of his generation, a champion of liberty, and an inspiration to millions and millions of people. Our prayers are with his wonderful wife, Eric, and his beautiful children. Fantastic people they are. We miss him greatly, yet I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The date of the ceremony will be announced, and I can only guarantee you one thing, that we will have a very big crowd. Very, very big.
President Donald Trump at the Pentagon, the start of his speech at the September 11th terrorist attack anniversary ceremony. NBC News writes, on his way back to the White House after his speech, President Trump told reporters he planned to speak with Kirk's family later Thursday. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife are traveling to Utah on Thursday to meet with Kirk's family. Kirk co-founded Turning Point USA, an influential conservative group that is active on high school and college campuses as it works to mobilize young conservatives. That was from NBC News. And from CNN's Alana Treen on X, Charlie Kirk's casket will be flown from Utah to his hometown in Arizona on board Air Force Two on Thursday. Two sources familiar with the matter told CNN. Vice President J.D. Vance and Second Lady Usha Vance flew to Utah on Thursday to retrieve Kirk's casket and meet with the family. Wednesday night, President Trump released a video recorded in the White House Oval Office in which he says that rhetoric from the radical left and media are to blame for the deadly shooting of Charlie Kirk, and promised to find those responsible for political violence as well as the organizations that fund it and support it.
It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
Part of the video from President Donald Trump speaking from the White House Oval Office released Wednesday night. You heard about 40 seconds. It runs 4 minutes. New York Times writing about it. In his video, Mr. Trump connected Mr. Kirk's death to other recent attacks on political figures, all of them Republicans. He mentioned the attempt on his own life during a political rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, the 2017 shooting of Representative Steve Scalise, Republican of Louisiana, and attacks on immigration and customs enforcement agents. Mr. Trump made no mention of attacks on Democrats, including Melissa Hortman, the former Democratic Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives, who was killed in June. That was from the New York Times. Today on Capitol Hill, reporters asking the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Chuck Schumer, about this.
Can we get your reaction to President Trump blaming the radical left for what happened to Charlie Kirk yesterday?
Well, look, the bottom line is this is a time that all Americans should come together and feel and mourn what happened. Violence, which affects so many different people of so many different political persuasions, is an affliction of America. And coming together is what we ought to be doing, not pointing fingers of blame.
This moment requires leadership that brings the American people together as opposed to trying to further divide us. Political violence in any form against any American is unacceptable, should be denounced by everyone, and moving forward, we have to figure out a better way to come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York. Before that, Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, the House and Senate minority leaders. Politico writes the killing of Charlie Kirk is hitting lawmakers hard. Some, like Speaker Mike Johnson, were close with the conservative activists. For many others, his death in Utah is fresh evidence of a chilling escalation in political violence and the latest shocking reminder of their own exposure to attacks. Something happened on Capitol Hill, Johnson said on CNN Wednesday night. It's changed the atmosphere in the place. The shooting has sparked a deluge of members calling for heightened security, Johnson said in the interview, reporting from Politico. U.S. Capitol Police put out a statement today at approximately 1:07 p.m. The USCP Command Center was notified of a potential bomb threat directed towards the Democratic National Committee. Officers immediately responded and are currently checking the building and surrounding areas. So far, nothing has been found outside. We're checking inside of the building out of an abundance of caution. And then later, the Capitol Police sent out an all clear. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau writing on X, in light of yesterday's horrific assassination of a leading political figure, I want to underscore that foreigners who glorify violence and hatred are not welcome visitors in our country. And C-SPAN's Capitol Hill producer Craig Kaplan writing on X, the House announced the 5 Republicans and 3 Democrats to serve on the new Select Subcommittee to investigate the remaining questions surrounding January 6, 2021, a reference to the attack on the Capitol that day. The chair is Loudermilk, Republican of Georgia, and then Griffin, Republican of Virginia, Higgins, Republican of Louisiana, Nels, Republican of Texas, Hageman, Republican of Wyoming, the ranking member Swalwell, Democrat of California, Crockett, Democrat of Texas, and Moskowitz, Democrat of Florida. Under the House resolution that created this select subcommittee, its final report must be completed by the end of 2026. Music played at Ground Zero today in New York City. AP writes nearly a quarter century has passed since the September 11, 2001 attacks, but for many, the emotions of the day remain raw as ever. On Thursday, America marked the 24th anniversary of the deadly attacks with solemn ceremonies in New York, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Commemorations were punctuated by moments of silence, the tolling of bells, and the reading of the names of the nearly 3,000 killed. The 9/11 anniversary, often promoted as a day of national unity, came during a time of increased political tension. That from AP. Here are family members reading the names of those who were lost that day in New York City.
Melissa Candida Doy.
Brendan Dolan.
Robert E. Dolan Jr.
And my father, Meredith's father, and Sophie's father, who we love and miss and think about every single day. We wish you were here, and we will never forget you. David Lucian Williams.
And my grandmother, Louise A. Lynch, who will forever be in our hearts, and every day I ask my mom for another thing to learn about her. I love you, and I'll always remember you.
At the 9/11 memorial today in New York City. There was reading of the names as well at the Pentagon today on this terror attack anniversary. 184 service members and civilians killed when a hijacked plane hit the building 24 years ago.
Diane Hale McKenzie. Stanley R. Hall. Carolyn B. Hammond. Michelle M. Hindenburger.
The Pentagon ceremony has traditionally been held near the Pentagon 9/11 memorial outside the walls of the building, but this year it was moved to an internal courtyard, reportedly out of security concerns after yesterday's shooting death of activist Charlie Kirk. President Trump, joined by First Lady Melania Trump, spoke about the attacks and the aftermath.
In the years that followed, America's warriors avenged our fallen and sent an unmistakable message to every enemy around the world. If you attack the United States of America, we will hunt you down and we will find you. We'll go all over this sometimes magnificent earth. We will crush you without mercy and we will triumph without question. That's why we named the former Department of Defense the Department of War. It will be different. We won the First World War. We won the Second World War. We won everything before that and in between. And then we decided to change the name. Well, now we have it back to where we all want it. Everybody wanted it. Everybody is so happy to have it back. You will fail and America will win, win, win. The enemy will always fail. 24 years have passed since that Tuesday morning in September, and an entire generation of Americans have come of age in a totally different world. While they cannot remember the agony of that day, they are carrying on the legacy of those who lost.
President Donald Trump speaking at the Pentagon 9/11 anniversary ceremony today. Senator Ben Ray Lujan, Democrat from New Mexico, posting on social media, "Our nation was forever changed on September 11, 2001 by the horrific terrorist attacks that claimed thousands of innocent lives. 24 years later, we continue to honor the memory of those we lost and the bravery of the first responders and bystanders who rushed toward danger to save others. Today and always, we honor our promise to never forget our fellow Americans." And from Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, 24 years ago today, I attended a meeting in the Pentagon just before it was struck by terrorists. As Americans honor the memory of those we lost on 9/11, we must remain vigilant. We must recommit to defending the homeland against today's threats. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke on the Senate floor about the anniversary.
While 9/11 was America's darkest hour, I also saw New Yorkers in our finest moments. There were countless acts of kindness by strangers to help each other. In the midst of the tragedy that the world saw, the true strength of America and New York came through. The next day, I called on every American to display the flag on their clothes outside their homes as a sign of solidarity. And ever since that day, I wear this flag on my lapel. And every time I look at it, I think of those who were lost. It's a small but constant reminder of our sacred promise: never, never forget. Never forget especially means honoring the countless brave first responders who ran towards danger, not away from it, to save lives. In our darkest hours, these heroes, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, so many others, risked their lives, construction workers, to rescue others. Many of the finest first responders became sick because of the toxins in the air. Many were diagnosed with rare, deadly cancer and diseases, and many, far too many, succumbed to their illnesses, including my great friend, Ray Pfeiffer, may he rest in peace. That's why I have fought to secure nearly $1.7 billion for the World Trade Center Health Program to help sick first responders get the care they need. Sadly, it's been such a struggle to get that money.
The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, today on the Senate floor. Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, remembered the victims of the 9/11 attacks from her city and praised the city's emergency first responders in a ceremony at the largest fire station in Washington, saying our nation changed in an instant in New York City at the Pentagon and, of course, in the skies over Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We pray for the nearly 3,000 lives lost on that day and the lives that have been lost since. This is Washington Today. From Associated Press, National Guard troops patrolling the streets of U.S. cities, weapons of war deployed against international gangs suspected of drug trafficking, military bases and resources redirected to mass immigration enforcement operations. President Donald Trump is swiftly implementing his vision of the military as an all-powerful tool for his policy goals. It's ground that presidents have hardly ever crossed outside of times of war, and experts say it's remaking the role of the most powerful military in the world and its relationship with the American public. Yet, as Trump has dramatically stepped up his use of military force, fellow Republicans in Congress, where authorization for such actions is supposed to originate, have done little but cheer him on. That's giving the president significant leeway as he raises plans to send troops next to Chicago, Baltimore, and New Orleans. That was from Associated Press. Today, Marine Corps General Christopher Mahoney, nominated for Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was asked about U.S. troops in cities during his confirmation hearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee. These questions from Senator Lissa Slotkin, Democrat of Michigan.
You're now wanting to be the number 2 military advisor to the president. What issues did you raise when you got the order to send 700 Marines? What concerns did you have? What did you sort of push and pull in that conversation to make sure to protect both civilians but the reputation of the military?
Senator, thanks. And when that order came down, our discussion was, how do we accomplish the mission? And are we trained, manned, and equipped for it? And that discussion went on very seriously from the commandant right on down to the company commanders that we're going to go forward. I will tell you that we trained to the standing rules of use of force. We trained to de-escalation techniques. We trained on the personal protective equipment, which I would expect of Marines to do before they left the assembly area. And I will tell you that the deepest conversation and the deepest concern with making sure that those Marines were ready to execute orders professionally were those battalion commanders and those company commanders, to talk about reputation of the cloth. They would not step forward across the line of departure until they were man trained and equipped to accomplish the mission that they have been given.
So if you were asked, now the president talks about sending troops to other places, if you were asked to change the rules of engagement to include arrest, detention of American citizens, hot pursuit, instead of, tag teaming with law enforcement, you were asked to change those rules of engagement so that the U.S. military would be engaging in what I believe to be unlawful actions in the streets of America. Would you push back on that or other illegal orders that contravene the Constitution?
Before I go too far down the hypothetical here, which is reasonable, my best military judgment in my position now, or should I be confirmed, will be based on the facts and circumstances and the tasks that we've been given and the effect that we're trying to achieve and the training that we need in order to do it. That entire cascade of receipt of order to calling out the tasks, explicit and implied, building courses of action.
I understand, but if something was and this is almost an issue of conscience at this point, right? We're relying on your issue of conscience that if you were asked to do something that contravened the Constitution and would greatly hurt the reputation of the military, that you, privately, I don't need you to do it publicly, but that you would stand up and push back and give your best military advice against such actions.
Senator, and I will do that publicly. That is an easy question. if I am ever put into a situation where 38 years of an oath is put at risk to do something different, the answer is simple. I will adhere to my oath to the Constitution. That's what is expected from the chairman. That's what's expected from the entire National Command Authority and from the American people.
Appreciate that.
Senator Lissa Slotkin, Democrat of Michigan, questioning General Christopher Mahoney, nominee for Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, currently serving as Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, at the Senate Armed Services Committee hearing today. There's a Reuters article on a new Reuters Ipsos poll that reads, on crime, only 32% of Americans said they would feel safer with armed soldiers deployed to large cities in their state, the poll found. Some 62% of Trump's fellow Republicans were warm to military patrols in big cities, but only 1 of 4 independents felt the same way, as did just 1 in 10 Democrats. That was from Reuters. The U.S. House of Representatives today passed a bill that would increase criminal penalties for undocumented immigrants who illegally enter the U.S. or re-enter after having been deported or denied entry. The vote was 226 to 197, 11 Democrats joining all Republicans in voting yes. Congressman Derek Schmidt, Republican of Kansas, supported the bill during the debate before the vote.
Our colleagues on the other side think if they just talk about enough other things long enough, the clock will run out, and that the American people will forget the disaster that the policies of the prior administration created not just on our border, but throughout our communities in this country for the prior 4 years. Well, they're mistaken. We're not going to forget. And we're not going to stop until we fix the holes in our law that enabled bad policies to drive through them. That is what this bill is about. This bill is about focusing on the worst of the worst. It is about focusing on those who are not deterred under current law by the threat of a 2-year prison sentence, perhaps because they're being paid by the cartels or enabled by the cartels, and the risk is worth it. That's who this is aimed at. That's why a 5 to 10-year prison sentence is warranted, valid, and necessary. And, Speaker, I want to share just one story from my home state of Kansas about why we care about this issue. It's just one example. In March of 2016, Pablo Antonio Serrano Vitorino, an illegal alien from Mexico, shot and killed 4 people in my state. And then while fleeing from law enforcement, he killed another person in Missouri. And here's the kicker. It wasn't his first time in the country. Wasn't his first crime in our country. In 2004, he was convicted in California of making a terrorist threat. He was deported, and he came back. And in the years that ensued, he encountered law enforcement when he committed battery, when he committed drunk driving, when he committed traffic infractions. And he came back, and he stayed. Now, I can't say with certainty that if ICE had done their job and shown up, if the prosecutors had actually prosecuted, if the law were tough enough, none of that would have happened. But I can sure say the odds are much better that those 4 people, those 5 people, might still be alive. And I can certainly say that justice would have been done. So this bill's a good first step. We need to do it.
Gentleman's
it's the right
time
thing.
has expired.
I encourage all of my colleagues to support it.
I yield 10 seconds.
The gentleman yields.
I thank my colleagues. Let me just say, I hope we don't stop here. Let's put this on the president's desk. Let's keep going and finish the job. Thank you. I yield.
Congressman Derek Schmidt, Republican of Kansas, on the House floor. Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, followed Congressman Schmidt in the debate.
My friend and the good gentleman from Kansas says that the legislation is about the worst of the worst. And I beg to differ. The worst of the worst are already covered by existing law. If you commit a murder, like the gruesome murder he describes in his state, you can go to jail for life, and in many states, and I suppose Kansas, but I don't know, you're subject to the death penalty. If you commit rape, armed robbery, there are laws that cover that. And today, under Section 1326, if you have committed an aggravated felony, such as the kind that he describes, you already can be imprisoned an additional 20 years under the immigration statute. So I understand that it might be satisfying for us to say, we're just going to increase all these penalties, but we're not in any way connecting with the worst of the worst. What are we really doing? We're saying that we're going to hold people who've done nothing other than enter the country illegally for much longer periods of time, for 5 years or 10 years. And again, we see this as very wasteful in terms of public tax dollars. So if you set aside the murderers, the rapists, the armed robbers who we're going to get under existing laws that make all of that criminal, and you look at what's actually happening here, it's a focus on people who are entering the country illegally. And we have to ask ourselves, is it economically worthwhile to us to say that we're so mad at those people, we want to hold them in our jails for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or even life in certain circumstances, rather than send them back to their own country and toughen the border so they can't get back in, which is precisely the purpose of the legislation that was rejected at the end of 2024 on toughening up the border. We should go back and do that rather than having people continually come back in.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, on the House floor today before the House passed this bill, a vote 226 to 197. There's an Associated Press article, a plane carrying more than 300 workers from South Korea who were detained during an immigration raid at a battery factory in Georgia last week left Atlanta shortly before noon Thursday, bound for South Korea. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung on Thursday called for improvements to the United States visa system, saying Korean companies will likely hesitate to make new investments in the U.S. until that happens. Reporting from AP. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Coming up live Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN Radio. Former U.S. Trade Representative and Council on Foreign Relations President Michael Froman speaks at the Brookings Institution about U.S.-China trade. Again, listen live at 10 a.m. Eastern Time here on C-SPAN Radio, and find all of C-SPAN Radio's schedule information on our website at cspan.org.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Axios writes Senate Republicans officially changed chamber rules on Thursday to allow unlimited groups of nominees to be voted on at once. Starting next week, Republicans aim to quickly move through a backlog of more than 140 civilian nominees after 6 months of facing Democratic roadblocks. The Senate voted along party lines, overruling the chair to allow non-cabinet and non-judicial nominees to be voted on in big groups. They're expected to vote on the first such block of 48 nominees next week after additional procedural votes. There was a last-ditch effort at a bipartisan deal for a more limited rules change that would cap any block of nominees at 15. Key senators huddled for hours Thursday afternoon. The vote to allow the Senate to take up the bipartisan proposal Thursday failed to receive the needed unanimous consent, and Republicans denied Democrats' request to let negotiations drag into the weekend. That was from Axios. Here is some of the debate. Senator Brian Schatz, Democrat from Hawaii, who is advocating for pushing off that bipartisan proposal until next week.
This would be the first major bipartisan rules reform, I think, in a political generation, maybe several political generations. And it is not your usual suspects of moderates who might be able to get you guys to 60, but a pretty wide swath of United States senators on the Democratic side to try to reform the rules on a bipartisan basis. And we are achingly close to doing this like adults. And it is not lost on me on 9/11 and after the terrible political assassination of Mr. Kirk that we have a special obligation to demonstrate that politics is a substitute for violence and not a precursor to violence. And we have to demonstrate that we can be adults. And so we were achingly close to a deal, but I am afraid that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have run out of patience. And I understand the overall argument about the number of nominees that are in a backlog. I understand that argument. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about they just want to go today. They want to leave today. People have flights today. It is Thursday, and it is not 5 p.m. And so Were we to work a weekend to try to land this airplane, that would be beneficial to the country, to the body, to Republicans and Democrats alike. We are actually very close. And Senator Langford knows that. And I think he's as frustrated as I am about how achingly close we are to behaving like adults. And I don't know who it is or what the dynamic was, but about an hour ago, everybody just said, I don't care how close we are. We're just going to do this because we're going to start to lose members. We're going to start to lose momentum. The weekend is hard. Maybe we're going to get yelled at from the left and you're going to get yelled at from the right. And we just can't withstand that, so we just got to go through with it. It's a damn shame.
Senator Brian Schatz, Democrat from Hawaii, on the Senate floor. Speaking after him, Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, the majority leader, who argued that if the compromise is to be voted on, it should be voted on now, not next week. Otherwise, Republicans are going to move ahead with their original plan and unilaterally change the rules.
I would just say to my colleagues on the Democrat side, how much time is enough? How much time is enough? The proposal that we are voting on or want to vote on and just ask consent to get on has been around for 2 years. Introduced by Democrats. They had a hearing in the Rules Committee. It's been around for 2 years. In fact, what we're supposed to vote on today is less expansive than the bill that was discussed in the Rules Committee. The Democrat Rules Committee, a proposal made by Democrats. We don't include judges in this. Your proposal did. We're asking you to vote on a Democrat proposal, and you're saying, no, we won't even vote on it. We won't even get on it. Give me a break. 2 years, not long enough? How about 8 months? 8 months of this. 8 months of this. Look at that chart. 0. Every president going back to 41, George H.W. Bush, has had a majority, a supermajority, of their nominees approved here in the Senate by unanimous consent or voice vote. Look at that. 98%. 98% for Bill Clinton. 90% for George W. Bush. 90% for President Obama. 65% for Trump 1. 57% for Biden. Not trending in the right direction, which argues for everything that's being said here today about we need to fix a broken process. But that is an embarrassment. 0.
Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, the majority leader on the Senate floor during the debate over when the Senate would be taking up, if they took up, that compromise proposal. Republicans and Democrats got together and talked about how to speed up consideration of executive branch nominations. The major disagreement was, do we vote on it today or push it off until next week? Republicans wanted today. The Democrats wanted next week. Republicans not willing to accept that, and so they went ahead with their original plan, and they voted along party lines to invoke what has been called the nuclear option, creating a new precedent for advancing legislation to approve certain presidential nominations in groups at a new simple majority threshold instead of 60 votes. This is C-SPAN Radio's Washington Today. Times of Israel writes that Hamas vowed Thursday that the Israeli attack targeting its leaders in Doha will not alter the Palestinian group's terms on ending the war in Gaza, as those killed in the airstrike were buried with senior Qatari and Hamas officials in attendance. Hamas official Fazi Barhoum, in a televised speech, said the attack targeted its negotiation delegation while it was discussing U.S. President Trump's latest ceasefire proposal. He said this crime was an assassination of the entire negotiation process. We affirm that the U.S. administration is a full accomplice in this crime. That was from the Times of Israel. In Washington, U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, held a news conference with Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, to release a report about their recent trip to the Middle East.
The title of our report is "The Netanyahu Government is Implementing a Plan to Ethnically Cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. America is complicit. The world must stop it." The Netanyahu government has not kept its goals secret. And we start in this report by quoting members of the Netanyahu government, including Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, who has said that one of their war aims is the removal of the Palestinian population from Gaza. I urge all of you to read those quotes, because what now they're doing and what we witnessed is putting those goals into action in Gaza. We visited the Egyptian-Gaza border, and Senator Merkley and I had been there back in January 2024. And at that time, on the Gazan side of the border was the thriving Palestinian town of Rafah. This time, when we went to that border, we were able to climb up a taller building and actually look directly into Gaza. And what we saw with respect to Rafah was rubble. And you can see from this photo that Senator Merkley took that you could see it with your naked eye, and when you got your binoculars, you could see the city of Rafah, which had been home to about 210,000 people, Palestinians, reduced to rubble. We also met with some very courageous souls, people with true moral courage, people who had served in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and served in Gaza, who told us that they had been part of this systematic destruction of civilian infrastructure. Our report goes into some of the figures, but just for example, 90% of the homes in Gaza have been destroyed or severely damaged. And in our interviews and through our observations, it was clear that the Netanyahu government is also restricting the delivery of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, including using food as a weapon of war.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, opening up a news conference today in Washington. Standing beside him, Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, talking about their recent congressional delegation or CODEL trip to the Middle East. Reuters reports the United Nations Security Council on Thursday condemned recent strikes in Qatar's capital Doha, but did not mention Israel in the statement agreed to by all 15 members, including Israel's ally, the United States. Israel attempted to kill the political leaders of Hamas with the attack on Tuesday, escalating its military action in what the United States described as a unilateral attack that does not advance U.S. and Israeli interests. That was from Reuters. Bipartisan group of senators are pushing to label Russia a state sponsor of terrorism over kidnapped Ukrainian children, writes Axios, as momentum builds once again for a big bipartisan Russia sanctions package. Russia's violation of Polish airspace this week has reignited the desire of Senate leaders for a strong response to aggression from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Senators Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, Richard Blumenthal, Democrat of Connecticut, Amy Klobuchar, Democrat of Minnesota, and Katie Britt, Republican of Alabama, rolled out a new bill on Thursday that would put new pressure on Russia. The bill would label Russia and Belarus state sponsors of terrorism if they do not return the more than 19,000 children Ukraine says have been kidnapped during the war. The bill would hit Russia with economic sanctions if Putin refuses to negotiate with Ukraine, and would also set a 500% tariff on goods imported from countries that buy Russian oil. That was from Axios. Here's part of the news conference with the bill unveiling. Senator Richard Blumenthal taking out a marker to literally write Russia on the current list of state sponsors of terrorism under U.S. law, which include Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and Syria.
What we're doing here is calling Russia what it is under Vladimir Putin's leadership, which is a state sponsor of terrorism. And it will continue to be a state sponsor of terrorism unless it returns those children. And new leadership in Russia can remove it from that list. But for now, we want to add it to that poster. In fact, if somebody has a magic marker, we can do it right now.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. How do you spell Russia? All right, guys.
Thank you. So that's where Russia belongs. That's the club. That's the group, a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, I know there are all kinds of practical questions. What does it mean? What's the impact? And the point here is it brands Russia for what it is in the eyes of the world. A member of this exclusive pariah club that nobody wants to join, and condemns them not only for moral purposes, but also economic goals as well.
Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, joining other senators, Republicans, and Democrats at a news conference today. Story from The Guardian. Donald Trump has asked the EU to impose tariffs of up to 100% on India and China as part of an effort to force the Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine. U.S. President made the demand during a meeting between U.S. and EU officials discussing options to increase economic pressure on Russia on Tuesday, according to a White House official. That was from The Guardian. Today, the U.S. ambassador to India nominee, Sergio Gore, testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and was asked about Russia by Senator Bill Hagerty, Republican of Tennessee.
There are few relationships that are as critical for our national security and for our economic relationships as the relationship that we enjoy with India. And I've been fortunate, I would say, to be in the presence of both President Trump and Prime Minister Modi at the same time on multiple occasions. I can say this, there's a great relationship between the two leaders. There's a relationship that I could see of mutual trust, and I think it's a wonderful foundation. I also see an issue, and I think it's very clear that President Trump is dead serious about resolving the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. He's dead serious about bringing this to an end. And India can play an important role in this. You and I have talked about that, but India can play a critical role. I think my colleagues are aware of this. But there's sort of a circular transaction network where India buys Russian crude at a discount, they refine it, and they sell it back to the Europeans. We need the Europeans to be buying American energy. We need Russia's flow of funds to be shut down. We need to bring this conflict to an end. You have a unique and strong relationship with President Trump. Could you comment on how you would leverage that deep personal relationship with leadership in India to help bring the conflict in Ukraine to an end?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Our president has a deep friendship with Prime Minister Modi, and that is something that is unique. In fact, if you have noticed, when he has gone after other nations, he tends to go after their leaders for putting us in that position and for the United States imposing those tariffs. When the president has been critical of India, he has gone out of his way to compliment Prime Minister Modi. They have an incredible relationship. I've been with him in the same room. We're not that far apart on a deal already on these tariffs. To your point, getting India to stop buying Russian oil is a top priority for this administration. Bringing peace around the world is a top priority to this administration. This president has engaged in trying to resolve wars and conflicts all over the world, from Africa to the Middle East to Ukraine, and even Southeast Asia. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the time will arrive upon us in the next few weeks and next few months for all of this to get resolved.
Sergio Gore at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. He's nominated to be U.S. Ambassador to India. He has been U.S. Special Envoy for South and Central Asian Affairs and is currently Director of the White House Presidential Personnel Office, questioned by Senator Bill Hagerty, Republican of Tennessee. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told CNBC today he believes the U.S. will sort out a trade deal with India as soon as that country stops buying Russian oil. Wall Street today, the Dow up 600, closing above 46,000 for the first time at 46,108. NASDAQ up 157, S&P up 55. New York Times writes that U.S. inflation accelerated in August at a speed that is likely to keep the Federal Reserve cautious about lowering borrowing costs too quickly once it restarts cuts as soon as next week. Consumer Price Index released on Thursday by the Bureau of Labor Statistics rose 2.9% from the same time last year, the fastest annual pace since the start of 2025. Core inflation, which the central bank tracks as a gauge of underlying inflation since it strips out volatile items like energy and food prices, steadied at 3.1%. That was from the New York Times. An update on government funding, federal government funding, from government executive, congressional Democrats threatening to withhold their votes on a forthcoming measure to keep federal agencies open and funded, demanding Republicans first negotiate with them over upcoming changes to health care benefits that impact millions of Americans. The new fiscal year starts October 1st. Herschel Walker, former professional football player, then businessman who won the Republican nomination for U.S. Senator from Georgia and lost that race, today testified as the nominee for U.S. Ambassador to the Bahamas before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He said his business experience and people skills will make him successful in this position. And then he spoke about some of the issues he plans to address.
As you know, there's not been a Senate-confirmed U.S. ambassador to the Bahamas since 2011. The American and the Bahamian people deserve better. As ambassador, it will be my highest priority to keep American tourists and residents safe and secure. I will work closely with the Bahamian government on all matters pertaining to our mutual security. Having an ambassador in place is more important than ever. China is trying to increase its influence in the region. It has built nearly a $3 billion deep water port in the Bahamas and has made other moves that can threaten our national security. There is a rise in the drug smuggling there in the Bahamas, and this is a real danger to the United States. The threat of American lives cannot be overstated. Tackling this serious problem requires leadership, cooperation between our government. Through Operation Bahamas, Turks, and Caicos, the United States worked collaboratively with the Northern Caribbean to disrupt illegal trafficking. If confirmed, I will see that this initiative continue to be strong. The nearest island of the Bahamas are only 50 miles from the United States. The U.S. is the Bahamas' largest trading partner. If confirmed, I will advise American businesses community of trade and the investment opportunities that exist in the Bahamas. I will also make sure the Bahama government is a welcoming environment for the U.S. to invest so we can advance America's prosperity.
Herschel Walker, nominated for U.S. Ambassador to the Bahamas, testifying today before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The Washington Examiner had an article back in May when this nomination was announced that has this line: the U.S. ambassadorship to the Bahamas has long been filled by political players in both parties. And a story from the New York Times. The British government announced on Thursday it had fired its ambassador to Washington, Peter Mandelson, after a flurry of newly published emails and other correspondence painted a vivid portrait of his close ties to the financier and convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Before we go, we're pleased to share some C-SPAN news with you. Beginning this fall, all 3 C-SPAN networks will be available on YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV. C-SPAN's availability on these streaming platforms expands access to our network's trusted, unfiltered coverage of U.S. government. We'll update you on the launch date soon for all 3 C-SPAN networks available on YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV. Thanks for watching and listening wherever you follow C-SPAN. Have a good night.